Some forms of isolation are so deeply ingrained, they become a silent part of a person's fabric. This isn't the loneliness of empty rooms, it's the solitude of a crowded mind with no one to share its landscape. Have you ever felt completely unknown, even when surrounded by people? It's the realization that your most authentic joys and sorrows might never have a witness. This quiet ache begins to reshape your very identity, altering how you think and move through the world. Many assume that those without friends are simply antisocial, awkward, or content with their own company. But the truth is often far more layered. Frequently, these individuals feel things too intensely. They detect the unspoken, the slight hesitation in a voice, the flicker of a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Over time, they withdraw. Not from a dislike of others, but because each attempt at closeness starts to feel like a potential injury. From a psychological standpoint, extended social isolation activates the brain's primal alarm systems. The regions that process physical distress light up when we experience profound disconnection. This is why loneliness can feel like a visceral, physical weight. Your sleep may become restless. Your mind might constantly seek out threats and harmless interactions. We are neurologically designed for community, and being severed from it registers as a fundamental danger. In our digitally saturated age, you can have thousands of online connections yet feel profoundly unseen. Engagement metrics are not empathy. There is a vast difference between being acknowledged and being truly comprehended. This is a reality that people without friends know all too well. This journey rarely begins with a conscious decision. It's a gradual accumulation of subtle injuries. You share a vulnerable part of yourself and are met with indifference. You confide in someone, and your trust is betrayed. You reach out and feel misunderstood. So your nervous system learns a new rule. Vulnerability is risky. You cease initiating contact. You convince yourself that solitude is preferable. And for a while, it might even feel like peace of space you fully control. But eventually, that controlled solitude can transform from a refuge into a confinement. Human beings are inherently relational. Even the most independent spirit yearns to have their inner world reflected and validated by another. After years without this mirroring, something internal shifts. Your own thoughts become your primary companions. You find yourself revisiting past relationships, analyzing every misstep, every moment of rejection, searching for the origin point of the disconnect. You may assign blame to yourself or to circumstances, but often it's merely the intricate outcome of psychological patterns meeting life's pain. Psychologists identify a condition known as learned social helplessness. After repeated, unsuccessful attempts to bond, you subconsciously cease trying. Your brain begins to equate social initiative with inevitable rejection. So, even when you encounter genuinely kind and open individuals, your protective barriers remain firmly in place. You might verbally affirm your comfort with being alone, but a deeper part of you still longs for that one person who understands without a lengthy explanation. Yet, the more intensely you desire this connection, the more it seems to retreat from grasp. Loneliness has a corrosive way of undermining your self-worth. It murmurs that you are too complicated, too dull, or that others simply have more appealing options. Gradually, you come to believe this narrative, preemptively distancing yourself to avoid potential hurt. This isolation isn't born from arrogance, it's a defense mechanism. But here's the compelling nuance. Loneliness doesn't always present with visible sorrow. Many who lack friends appear entirely composed and productive. They achieve, they create, they post content that suggests a full life. But internally, they navigate two separate realities: the curated image and the raw, unfiltered experience. They have constructed a persona to operate without deep ties, but this version can feel hollow, like an actor in their own life story. It's simple to dismiss them as strange, detached, or difficult. But if you truly listen, their history often reveals a tapestry of quiet disappointment. Instances where they offered vulnerability and received carelessness in return. Over time, this disappointment crystallizes into their identity. They begin to associate intimacy with peril, openness with regret. So, they adapt to a life without it. The price of this adaptation is significant.
Without the mirror of genuine friendship, your perspective narrows. Your emotions reverberate in an echo chamber. There is no one to offer alternative viewpoints to temper your critical inner voice. Extended isolation can erode empathetic capacity, not because the desire to care vanishes, but because the muscle of mutual emotional exchange weakens without practice. Thus, some may develop a protective emotional numbness, not by choice, but as a necessary shield against the ache of unmet connection. Paradoxically, those with no friends often harbor a more intense longing for profound connection than most. They contemplate the nature of friendship with greater depth, analyze its mechanics, and idealize its potential. They find significance in brief, seemingly insignificant interactions, a moment of shared understanding, a genuine glance. When something is scarce, its smallest trace becomes precious. Loneliness also rewires behavior. Research indicates that chronic isolation can lead to hypervigilance in social decoding. They might dissect a simple text message for hidden meanings, perceive rejection in neutral actions, or imagine narratives that weren't intended. After a history of being overlooked, the brain becomes trained to expect it everywhere, even in benign situations. This creates a self-sustaining cycle. Your wariness is sensed by others, who then maintain their distance, thus confirming your isolated state. This isn't a character flaw. It's the mind's strategy for self-protection. Our perception of time is also distorted by isolation. Without shared milestones, days lose their definition. Holidays and weekends become ordinary because their significance is rooted in collective celebration. Studies show that loneliness actually alters how we experience time. Minutes can feel interminable, hours dense and heavy. When you are disconnected, you are living within the confines of your own cognition, rather than participating in the external flow of events. And yet, within this quiet, there is potential for profound transformation. Solitude, when entered into with intention, can be a crucible for growth. Many of history's most insightful artists, philosophers, and innovators endured periods of deep solitude. The critical factor is agency, the difference between solitude that is chosen and solitude that is imposed. Chosen solitude can be restorative. Forced solitude can be corrosive. One facilitates a reunion with your core self. The other persuades you that you are fundamentally unlovable. For many without friends, the line between the two is blurred. They might claim, "I'm not a social person," or "I value my independence." But in their quiet moments, they miss the unique resonance of being with someone who truly gets them the ease where words are unnecessary and silence feels like companionship. We often forget that friendship serves as a psychological mirror. It reflects back to us aspects of our personality we cannot perceive on our own. Without this reflective surface, it becomes difficult to measure your growth or evolution because we develop not in a vacuum, but through relational feedback. When that feedback is absent, you can begin to feel insubstantial, as if your life lacks an audience and therefore validation. This is the silent torment of having no friends, not merely the absence of company, but the erasure of presence, the pain of existing without an echo. Yet, beneath this torment often lies a well of profound empathy. Because they know the sting of being invisible, they are often the first to notice when someone else is on the outskirts. They are the ones who send a quiet message of care, who understand the profound impact of being acknowledged. And perhaps this is the ultimate paradox. Those who have no friends are often equipped with the very qualities that make for extraordinary friends, if only someone were to venture beyond their quiet exterior. There arrives a subtle turning point when someone steeped in loneliness understands that passive waiting may not lead to rescue. That perhaps healing commences not with the discovery of others, but with the recollection of the self you were before the walls went up. Because authentic friendship can only take root in the soil of self-trust. If you do not believe your thoughts have value, you will silence them. If you perceive your needs as inconveniences, you will neglect them. And so the pattern continues. Unseen, unheard, and unexpressed. Individuals without friends often reside in the long shadow of past experiences. Moments where they felt too distinct, too perceptive, too inwardly focused for those around them. Perhaps in childhood they were the child reading alone while others collaborated in play. Perhaps their compassion was too quiet to be noticed amidst the noise, or their passions lay outside the mainstream. Over years, they encased this sense of difference in a protective shell, pretending it was a preference, convincing themselves they were meant to walk a solitary path. But difference itself is neutral. It is the interpretation we assign to it that carries weight. When you mature feeling perpetually misunderstood, you internalize the belief that there is something inherently wrong with you. You begin to self-edit, speaking less, feeling less, expecting less, until you become a reduced version that might not even resonate with those who would appreciate your full self. The psychology underlying this is elemental. Our brains are crafted for belonging to clans, to communities, to a chosen few. It is a deep-seated survival imperative. But when belonging becomes associated with danger, when every outreach results in pain, the brain masters avoidance as a safeguard. Avoidance morphs into a security protocol, and security translates into loneliness. This is why many lonely individuals appear serene on the surface. Their autonomic nervous system is primed to anticipate social threat before it occurs. They exist in a state of perpetual self-monitoring, striving not to be too intense or too visible. What they frequently fail to see is that the longer this continues, the more they fade, not just from others' view, but from their own. It is akin to turning down your own brilliance to avoid drawing the wrong gaze, only to discover you are also invisible to the right ones. Psychologists discuss the social self-concept, the identity you form based on how you believe others perceive you. If your history is marked by exclusion or indifference, this internal mirror becomes warped. You presume that everyone will view you through the same lens of disregard. So, even when someone offers genuine warmth, you are skeptical. You assume it is mere politeness. You interrogate their motives. This is the vicious cunning of chronic loneliness. It not only disconnects you from people, but also severs you from the belief that connection is possible for you. But the human psyche is remarkably plastic. It can relearn the rhythms of connection. This is not a permanent fate. Much like a muscle that can be strengthened after atrophy, social confidence can be rebuilt through incremental brave actions. It begins with minor exchanges, holding a gaze for a second longer, responding to a message without protracted analysis, accepting an invitation despite the flutter of anxiety. It is not about manufacturing extroversion. It is about permitting the world to impact you again, one encounter at a time. Because friendship does not emerge from flawlessness. It blossoms from authenticity, the courage to appear as you are, without pretense. What is frequently overlooked is that those who have endured long stretches of loneliness often cultivate exceptional emotional intelligence. They ponder deeply, they watch intently. Having spent years studying human dynamics from the periphery, they discern subtleties that escape others. They recognize authenticity, they sense shifts in atmosphere, they differentiate between sincere care and social obligation. This is why shallow acquaintanceships leave them unsatisfied. They thirst for depth, but are simultaneously apprehensive of it. Consequently, they construct fortifications with peoples they want relationship, but only under conditions that feel secure, predictable, and where quietude feels enriching, not empty. These are not extravagant demands. They are the essentials of meaningful human contact. But there is a non-negotiable reality. Friendship necessitates vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like a tremendous risk when you have spent years fortifying your heart. You cannot build bonds without emotional transparency, and that transparency can feel like traversing a field of shards when you have been wounded before. So many choose to avoid it entirely. They declare self-sufficiency, but this is often a facade. They are simply exhausted from being the sole investor in connection. Yet, here lies the central paradox. When you abandon the effort completely, you substantiate the very fear that initiated your isolation. You make your loneliness a prophecy. This is how the psychology of solitude perpetuates itself, not due to an inability to connect, but because the mind becomes too fearful to gamble on the unfamiliar. But envision if connection was not about curation, but about candor. Envision if friendship was not an achievement to unlock, but an experience to permit. The reality is the individuals who are truly meant for you will not require a curated performance. They will meet you in your current state. They will interpret your stillness not as a void, but as profundity. Sometimes the initial step toward connection is not outward seeking, but inward grieving, mourning the prior versions of you that accepted less than you deserved. The version that pleaded for recognition. The version that mistook minimal effort for genuine care. The version that suppressed its own truth to maintain proximity to others. When you heal these wounded parts, a fundamental shift occurs. You begin to attract relationships from a place of abundance, not deficit, and this alters the entire dynamic. There is a distinctive liberation that arises when you cease pursuing validation from others and commence a sincere dialogue with yourself. You realize that aloneness does not equate to brokenness. It signifies that you are waiting congruence. You are waiting for individuals who do not merely endure silence, but enrich it. For friendships that feel as essential as respiration, not like a staged act. Loneliness can transform into a guide if you allow it. It illuminates the specific companionship your spirit authentically seeks. It reveals the energy you project and compels you to forge an inner resilience so that when the right people finally appear, you can engage with them from a place of grounded assurance, not trepidation. Here's an often unspoken truth. People without friends frequently become unparalleled self-observers. They nurture a self-awareness that can be rare. They dedicate time to introspection, inquiry, and personal evolution. And this depth, though forged in solitude, becomes the very attribute that eventually draws the appropriate people toward them, the kind who see not merely who you are superficially, but who you have become through all you have faced alone. But recovery from long-term isolation requires time and self-compassion. It cannot be expedited or simulated. It begins with tender self-acceptance, with learning to dialogue with yourself as a supportive friend would. When your inner critic asserts, "No one cares about you," counter with, "I am learning to care for myself deeply." When your fears whisper, "You will always be alone," affirm, "I remain receptive to genuine connection." Because your brain internalizes these responses. It recalibrates. Neural pathways are reshaped through consistent practice, not instantaneous miracles. The more you affirm your own worth and openness to connection, the more you will notice its possibilities when they arise. And they will arise. Because loneliness is not an immutable life sentence. It is a phase, an emotional winter that eventually yields to the thaw of spring if you permit it. The truth is, lacking friends does not make you less complete as a human being. It simply means your narrative is unfolding at a quieter volume. But quiet narratives can harbor immense power. They can be reservoirs of creativity, self-discovery, and profound meaning. Many of the world's most influential thinkers, artists, and visionaries spent significant periods in solitude before finding their tribe. And when they did, the bonds they formed were more substantial, insightful, and authentic, because they had first cultivated a solid relationship with themselves. So if you are currently someone with no friends, please hold this understanding. You are not defective. You are not unworthy. You are actively engaged in the process of your own becoming. The world has not passed you by. It is pausing for you to reclaim your own narrative. There will arrive a day when you find yourself seated opposite someone whose gaze conveys, "I feel I have always known you." In that moment, all the years spent questioning your place will coalesce into clarity. You will understand that your solitude was never a penalty. It was an incubation. Every silent evening, every unreciprocated outreach, every unspoken pain was sculpting you into a person capable of sustaining authentic connection when it finally arrived. You will stop longing for the applause of the multitude and start valuing the resonance of the few. You will cease pursuing external validation and start discerning harmonious energy. And you will finally grasp that friendship is not a numbers game. It is a phenomenon of recognition. It is that instantaneous, unspoken knowing when two people encounter each other and think, "You too. I believed I was the only one." And perhaps this is the most genuine form of friendship constructed not on relentless dialogue, but on mutual comprehension, shared sensitivity, and the collective decision of two spirits who have known solitude to ensure neither must face it alone again. Because meaningful connection is not about locating perfect individuals. It is about finding the truthful ones. The ones who can share your quiet without discomfort, who can find humor in your imperfections, and who can perceive the elegance in your intricate nature. Those are the connections worth the patience. And when they enter your life, you will finally comprehend the experience of being truly seen, not the persona you constructed for survival, but the essential person you were always destined to be. Until that moment, treat yourself with grace. Speak to yourself with kindness. And remember, even if there is no one physically beside you now, you are still deserving of being understood. You are still deserving of friendship. You are still an integral thread in the vast, invisible tapestry of human experience, connected in essence, even in your most solitary hours. And perhaps one day, you will cross paths with another who has also walked the path of having no friends. You will recognize it in their demeanor of familiar quiet, a kindred understanding. You will offer a smile, and they will return it. And in that simple exchange, two isolated universes will discover a bridge, and loneliness will not be the conclusion of your story, but the foundation of your next beginning. If this exploration spoke to you,
Please like this video and subscribe to Winds of Thought for more journeys into the human psyche.